Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Sustainable Mail Group's third symposium of the year, Sustainable Choices, Measurable Gains, Unlocking the Business Benefits of Sustainability Initiatives. My name is Andrew Gustin, and I'm the Executive Director of the Sustainable Mail Group. And I'm a face that generally has been a moderator rather than kind of the host here, but a regular host, Ward Griffin, who's the CEO of Low Martin, is away at the moment. So before we jump on to introducing our moderator and our panelists, I just want to go through some minor housekeeping details for the event. The event's scheduled from 2 p.m. till 3 p.m. this afternoon, Eastern Time. You can ask questions anytime during the session, but they'll only end up being answered in roughly the last 10 minutes of the event. I think I mentioned this before, but the event is being recorded and we'll post it to the Sustainable Mail Group's YouTube channel, where you can find virtually all of the past events that we've ended up posting, and you're welcome to share those with anybody and review them. There's some great content there. If you don't want to miss any of the content, I recommend that you both subscribe to our channel as well as subscribing to our Eventbrite channel as well, and click on the bell icon so that you can, when you end up getting new content being loaded, you won't miss any of that. And then lastly, last two things are, if you like what you see, please consider joining the Sustainable Mail Group. If you haven't already, there's a link that's been provided in the chat right now that should provide you a form that you can fill in and you can become a member. And then also the last thing, if you haven't received our direct mail design guide, there's also another link that we've provided in the chat, which will enable you to fill in a quick form, and we'll mail a copy of that out for you. And that's something that we've taken a great deal of pride and put a lot of work and effort into producing. So moving forward, let me hand over this to our moderator for today's event, and that's Paige Goff, who on my screen is on the very left-hand side. Hopefully that's wherever she appears on everybody else's screen. But Paige Goff is Vice President of Sustainability at Domtar. I've known Paige for quite a while, actually, and we've been very, very lucky to have Paige not only act as the moderator for this event, but she's also ended up being a past panelist on one of our sessions. Domtar designs, manufactures, markets, and distributes a wide variety of communication specialty and packaging papers, market pulp, and air-laid nonwovens. Paige, you're going to have to tell me what that means right after I finish introducing you. So in that role, Paige is responsible for communicating Domtar's key sustainability and business initiatives to all of the internal and external stakeholders of the company. She also develops and leads all partnerships with environmental, non-governmental organizations, NGOs, and oversees sustainability communications for Domtar. Paige, thank you for participating in this and taking on this role, and I'm going to hand it over to you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here. So why don't we hand it over to our guest panelists and have them introduce themselves. Why don't we go in the order of Holly, Steve, and then Richard. Holly, go ahead.
Sure, yeah. Hi, everyone. So my name is Holly Denson-Camp, and I am the Sustainability Specialist at Mitchell. So I've been here for about 1.5 years now, and I've had the unique experience of working in Mitchell's first dedicated environmental role, which is really exciting. My background is in environmental sustainability and climate action. So I've spent the last little while applying that expertise to the world of print. So yeah, today I'm hoping to speak to the perspective of, a company who's thinking of hiring a sustainability champion and, provide advice on getting started, in that area. But yeah, looking forward to discussing sustainable choices in printing and direct mail and learning from my panelists today.
Thank you, Holly. Steve?
Hi there, Steve Falk here. I'm the VP of Sustainability and Partnerships at the AIM Group in Aurora, Ontario. That's a company that has been a leader in print and is growing its impact on the direct mail business. And in doing that, we've been developing ways to have a carbon neutral direct mail, offsetting some of the carbon that's used in the direct mail process, and helping our clients understand how they can reduce and address these issues. So it's great to be here as a panelist as part of this group.
Wonderful. Richard?
Thanks, Paige. Yeah, Richard Cowan from Hemlock Printers. I'm the odd one out because I wasn't able to get my face put in the picture frame, so I really tried. I don't know if Andy set me up there, but now I'm not like in the roof anymore, so I feel better about that.
Yeah,
but yeah. So president at Hemlock, Vancouver-based or Burnaby-based commercial printer. 50 something years in the business, 55 years in business. We also have two affiliate companies, one called Hemlock Harling, which is a mailing and distribution facility. So that's where we do all of our mailing and fulfillment work. And we have a wide format company called Hemlock Display, which is where I am right now. And that's in the wide format sign side. I've been quite close to the sustainability work at Hemlock for nearing 20 years now. And it's just a never-ending process of things to work on, and things to work on without enough time to work on them. But it's a lot of fun, very rewarding, and it's been great to really, it's been something that staff feel really proud of and they're involved with, and it's a lot of opportunity to work with suppliers and clients. And so as an opportunity for business, it's a really good way to collaborate, internally and externally. So happy to participate.
Well, Richard, I think that you are leading me really well into my first question for you guys. We have, a lot of the low-hanging fruit has already been accomplished with our sustainability goals and initiatives and programs. And we really need to kind of raise that bar and figure out how to continue to do the right thing for the environment. So if each one of you guys can just let me know what you're working on, what your current environmental initiatives are, any programs that you have that we can kind of learn from and glean from, because it's an evolutionary process. It doesn't happen overnight. We have to continue to grow and keep going. So Richard, since we ended with you, why don't we start with you this time?
Sure, yeah. So I think the work that we do is in the two categories. So one would be the internal facing work, and then the other is the customer facing stuff. And there's definitely a connection between the two. But on the operational side, most of our work has been in the like the visible work is on the waste reduction side. So that's in the materials that are managed through the production process and what we do with them. So that work's been ongoing, and it's like one of these major projects, and we definitely want to work towards that sort of zero waste concept where nothing's going to landfill. And so that's the big one. Obviously, procurement internally is a big one, and measuring greenhouse gases through surveys with staff and those kinds of things, and that whole side of it. So then on the customer facing side, it's in explaining the certifications that are available, explaining the different substrates that are available. And that's always a bit of a thing to navigate, and always changing, and new materials that are coming out. So education on the materials side, and the certification side. And then what we have is a zero program, which is similar to Steve, which is like a carbon neutral program. And that kind of captures like the benefit of a lower carbon material, which generally has higher recycled content, things like that. So, so there's definitely a linkage between the two, but one is very focused on sort of the nuts and bolts in the plant. How do we, lower our impact? And then the other one is more education, engagement, and trying to get this client to kind of choose a certain type of specification. Yeah.
Sure. Great. Thank you so much. And if we can just tag on this, like, how did you come up with these objectives? Like, I think that, once you obviously waste reduction, greenhouse gas is the sexiest thing right now, like the reduction of that, net zero goals. But how did you determine, how did you set these goals? Who set them? Who helped you? Like, what is it? One person? Is it a group of people? Like, how do you come up with this is what we're going to do, and this is what we're standing by?
It's definitely like all of the above. Like every sales will bring things forward. On the staff side, it's like a committee that actually we haven't met for a little while because we don't have a sustainability lead, which is part of our issue, is there's no one to run that committee. But But we have a committee, or have over the years had a committee. And that's where like a lot of the ideas kind of get formalized. And then at the leadership or the management level, we try to bring those ideas forward and make sure they're part of the management discussion. So I think it's like, it's not perfect. It's really like multiple stakeholders inside the business have to see value in it. And then it kind of works its way through the different groups. But having a staff-driven committee is most of the time that's focused on the operations, like in things inside the building. And then on the external stuff, that's more sales and marketing and management driven. But there's no real formula there. It's just make sure it's a priority. Yeah.
Well, I like to say, it's not the responsibility of the greenies in the corner and the person that has a sustainability in their title. It should be everybody, and it needs to go across the organization. So that's very important. So Steve, I ask you the same question. Like, what are your initiatives? What are the programs that you're working on? And how did you determine that those are the hot points for your organization?
Well, thanks. We're in a building phase right now because I originally started down this path when the company was called Prime Data, and we were merged with a company called AIM, and we're now doing all this corporate restructuring and stuff. So it's interesting. It's almost like starting again with educating staff, getting various stakeholders in the organization to realize what the opportunities are. Like, why, if you go back to this sort of theme of today's meeting, which are what are the business benefits, you sort of start from ground zero again, going, because you have a whole new team of people who are like, why are we doing this? New sales reps who need to be trained. It's a big job, so you start a bit at a time. You got to do the internal stuff to try and get people inside understanding why this is of any interest at all, and then work out from that so that your clients start to understand things. It's an educational process through everything that you do, like emails and webinars that you may hold, or you go out and you go to trade shows and stuff, and then do a presentation on sustainability in the marketing and advertising sector, and try and get people interested in it. How we started it, I just think clearly everybody who reads a newspaper understands that carbon emissions is a big subject, right? So it's like, if it seemed to me like I had no idea at all what the carbon emissions were for the industry I was involved with, and I've been involved with it my whole life. It just seemed like a great starting point to find somebody who would help me understand that. And I literally there's nothing like a story to tell how simple this can be sometimes, but it seems complicated when you're going to tackle these things. And I met this young man who was doing it, carbon emission analysis for a municipality at a Christmas party. He was like a friend of my daughter, and we started talking over Christmas, Glühwein or something. And he's like, yeah, I do these analysis for a municipality. I figure out how much the carbon emissions for their buildings and their vehicles are. And I was like, could you do it for us? And literally just went from there, and then just built on it, and have had a curiosity and interest about carbon emissions in this industry. So I learned a lot about it, and I continue to read about it, learn about it all the time. It can start as simply as having a conversation with somebody at an event that just lights the fire in your organization to dig deeper.
Passion is key. It's got to be something that we think about every day and really push forward. And education, I think, is very critical, because again, you don't know what you don't know. And I think that a lot of times, because I know for myself, with being in charge of sustainability for the past 10 years, I eat, breathe, and live it. And sometimes you really need to take a step back and say, even the smartest person in my organization may not understand a very elementary part that I think I do. So I think taking a step back sometimes is very important, and making sure that we bring everybody up and don't take for granted that educational component. So Holly, what about your organization, and what are you guys working on?
Yeah, Paige, like you said, a lot of the groundwork has already been laid. So I think some of the areas where maybe we're going above and beyond in that is kind of three separate things. So right now we've kind of just launched a partnership with Print Relief, which is really exciting. They provide certified reforestation to offset any of the biomass loss that's associated with paper consumption. So that's something that's been really exciting that we've been working on. It's something that I run, and we've had really great customer response. It's something that people can really visualize. I am printing a project and now I am planting a tree to offset it. So that's been really exciting. Another area is, like Richard was mentioning, about the climate and emissions tracking. So we work with Climate Smart through BMO Radical. So that's a really handy tool that probably a lot of people are familiar with in this industry, but they allow us to measure our company's comprehensive emissions. So, we're collecting various kinds of data, shipping distances, natural gas, hydro consumption, paper usage, all these different things, and then using their software to calculate the emissions factors for each activity. And then we can produce things like our annual CO2 equivalent emission reports. So yeah, we find that really useful. The goal is to have, a deep understanding of our emissions habits and the trends over time. And then we're able to provide that transparency to our partners and customers and, help inspire some industry change. We want to show what we're doing and kind of help others around us to be inspired to make those changes as well. And then, internally, our recycling program, kind of similar to what Richard mentioned, we want to always be promoting the educational awareness and things like that. So my work with our recycling program is more around evaluating its effectiveness and recommending new strategies. So, we do our annual evaluation with the dumpster dive, which is really exciting. We go into the dumpster and figure out what's in there, kind of get a snapshot of our recycling practices and see what's still ending up in the dumpster. And then we can, identify problem materials and develop some more robust strategies to tackle those challenges. Those are kind of our big things that I like to talk about that I think are new and interesting. But yeah, in terms of how we landed on those, we kind of wanted to look at our industry and determine what areas were the most impactful to address. So understanding that we are an inherently extractive industry, a big portion of our environmental impact comes from paper consumption and material usage. So addressing those areas specifically, we thought would be the most impactful. That's why, working with Print Relief, we wanted to address the paper consumption on that side of things, as well as, putting a big focus on our zero waste initiatives to ensure that we're using our materials effectively and not wasting. Yeah, that's kind of how we came to decide on those things. But yeah.
No, I love to hear all the passion in your voices when you guys are explaining all the initiatives you're working on, because it's a lot of work. And one thing that I think that we as an industry, paper printing, is that we don't articulate enough what the good things we are doing. And so, Holly, you were explaining about that transparency kind of component and making sure. So when you have all these initiatives, how do you articulate and share what you think is success? Like, how do you share your successes with your external, internal audiences around those initiatives that you're working on? So Holly, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, I think one of the most important things is, your customer response. We're doing this to alleviate a lot of the sustainability pressure from our customers. So we want to know that what we're doing matters to them, that, will allow them to work with us and choose us as a partner. So I think a big measure of success is just the response that you're getting from, the industry and the people that you want to work with. You're going to generate traction by bringing on like-minded people and kind of getting people in your same area. I think, there's going to be a lot of, future success and future cost savings that comes with investing in sustainability. That's kind of one of the biggest issues that people always talk about is, why am I investing in this so much at the beginning? I'm not going to see those benefits necessarily right away. But, it's all about mitigating future risk. It's an inherently, future-proof thing to invest in. You're going to be protecting yourself from things like paper shortages, which we've seen. There's been lots of issues around getting paper. And so maybe if we're investing more time in, testing out alternative fiber options, that's something that, will protect us in the future from shortages and things that might be, affecting other people in the industry. And that's where you can really stand out based on, where you've put your money, essentially.
Absolutely. Well said. Richard, how do you measure success?
So there's a number of things we've measured closely over the years, and they're more like, sort of granular, like purchasing stuff, like how much of the paper that we put through our plant is FSC certified, or of the paper we bought, how much of it is, post-consumer waste. So those are things we've published sort of as a, where we didn't really publish that goal for a little while, but we had this target of the total of the combined total procurement. We did 30% of that total weight of material we wanted to be recycled or post-consumer recycled. So we were kind of tracking around in that level. And then we wanted to be 100% FSC. So we had no FSC product coming into the building. I think we're probably in the 90% range in terms of paper-based stuff. But so those are the procurement side. And then on the waste side, we would do dumpster dives as well and kind of measure that and sort of get a sense of like, what is our total diversion that of material that we're using, waste material that ends up not in landfill, and then how much goes to landfill. So we publish that stuff. And then on the carbon side, it's the GHG footprint year over year, and whether we can, as a kind of total amount, can we reduce that? And we've been tracking that and publishing that. We have had, it's very difficult though, because your business fluctuates in volume, and it's it's a very, very difficult thing to kind of track year over year, in terms of like where you're at and as a kind of perspective on how the business has changed. But we do publish our GHG numbers. And then the traction on the Zero program is probably one interesting one, which is we have this carbon neutral program and how many clients are participating and how many jobs they're going through. So those are things that we all track. Well, I think probably the big driver is just how much new business can you generate as a result of your sustainability efforts. And I think most printers that are active in this space, instead of focusing on the cost and whether it's going to cost clients more, the focus should be more on how much new business can you generate, and how does these activities strengthen the relationships you have with your existing customers? Does it increase the loyalty with existing customers? And I think it's not like we have numbers on that, but I can tell you our salespeople feel that it's opening new doors and it's driving loyalty and strengthening the relationships. So I think the ability to publish statistics on your operations and on your procurement, those kinds of things, essentially serve the purpose of increasing the loyalty, because you're basically backing up your commitment with real tangible results. And that's basically what customers are looking for. They're looking for like a real commitment, and you're helping them participating in that improvement without them having to go through that effort. They just pick the vendor that is doing that work, right? So I think that's the ultimate
too, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
And that's that point around mitigating future risk, because basically the buying habits are going in this direction. This is where the purchases are going. It's not a question of this niche buyer. It's a question of the general buying habit is going to look more into how responsible is your supply chain, how proactive is your supply chain. So I think that's the ultimate measure, but it's very difficult to put a specific number on it. It's just, we just know from the last 15 plus years that it basically drives new opportunities and it drives loyalty, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Steve?
Hi there. And I have noticed that my internet's fluctuating a little bit here. So if I suddenly freeze or something, it's just due to I'm working remotely. So yeah, one of the things we did is as I mentioned earlier, that discussion led to some research. So we commissioned a study, and that's published on our website. And we try to understand whether that's going to change greatly month to month or year to year. It's a great baseline study. If anyone's curious, you can go to the AIM website, aim.com. That's AIIM, and look up sustainability report. You'll see there's a very easy to read report there that will document kind of the greenhouse gas emissions of our plant, and then upstream of us, the paper, and downstream of us, everything from the delivery to the post office to Canada Post's delivery. And so by being able to share this, partly it's a tool to help clients understand and our staff understand, well, what is the real carbon emissions related to creating direct mail? And then you can use that as a bit of a baseline. If somebody says to you, and describes any one change in your business, you can look at that and go, it might have an impact. And here's why, because look at this pie chart. These different things have different amount of impact. So changing paper would have this kind of impact, or changing how far we have to drive to deliver the mail. So it's nice to have some benchmarks to hold against. And then it also helps you understand the business. So when you're making decisions about things, and so one of the things that we measure is the weight, because what we found is that there's almost like a one-to-one correlation between the weight of the direct mail pieces that you're doing and the carbon emissions. It has to do with the weight of transporting it and the weight of the paper. It's kind of one-to-one.
Yep.
And so, easy answers for people are like, there'll be more emissions if you do a heavier mail piece. And so if you have extra pieces in and everything else, and your main concern is carbon, then you might think, how do I reduce it? How do I put a lighter paper stock in? Those kinds of things would be easy. Like you just basically look at these pie charts that we've made and go like, see, that's where weight makes the difference, right?
Right.
And there's like even easy calculator that we made that helps you just kind of plug in weight numbers into that, multiply out the pieces of mail, and to back up that works pretty well. I noticed that Royal Mail, I'm in the UK right now, but Royal Mail actually has a carbon offset for their mail. So you can put in 10,000 pieces of mail weighing 50 grams, put in your credit card and buy carbon offsets for their part of the delivery. And when I looked at our comparison for carbon offset for the delivery component, it's like a rounding error. So I feel like we did some pretty good work in Canada to try and figure out what it was too.
Right.
But anyway, that's the kinds of things that we measure to try and make it possible to explain things to our staff, to our clients, and to make some, obviously part of this is about making good decisions, right? So if somebody comes and says, what could I do to change this so that, I had less of an impact, and then you've got somewhere to go.
Yep. Well, thank you guys. You guys have told me a lot of awesome things that you're working on, but I'm going to kind of flip it a little bit and tell me what's really hard. Like, what is your biggest opportunity? And I'll start kind of with Domtar. We are looking at net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, like trying to figure out a pathway. We're not even saying we're going to get there, because we have been on definitely a hamster wheel, like trying to figure out what's the right way to do it, what's apples and apples. It is not easy at all. And so this is a huge opportunity for us, and we haven't figured it out. We have very smart people on it, but it's a day-to-day kind of transition as we kind of look forward. So Richard, like, what keeps you up at night? Like, what's something that you're like, this is so hard, and we've got to figure this out, because if we all have those opportunity moments.
Yeah, I think for us, it's just momentum. Like, how do you keep momentum up, over a period of years? And there's, I've said it before, there's no shortage of ideas. This is what's so rewarding about this work, especially when you're collaborating with like suppliers and you're collaborating with community and all that. It's really a rewarding part of the work. But then there's also like, your inbox and your and the job that's not going to make it on time, and all this other stuff all that stuff that gets in the way, but I think that, and all of a sudden 6-8 months goes by. So I think how do you keep the organization focused on this and figuring out ways to keep it like top of mind as a strategic objective has been the hardest part. And not that it's more like we get momentum, we get a bunch of stuff done, and then we kind of ride on that for a while, and then we get some more momentum again. And that usually relates to myself getting help with a couple of people internally that kind of get in there and we kind of work together. So I think just maintaining momentum and kind of realizing the goals that are in front of you around this stuff, but understanding it's something you just keep working at. And I think, I've learned that well, I wanted to have that done 2 years ago. Well, here we are now, and you just keep going. Right. Yeah. But that's the part that is the hardest. And there's many things that I think, there's more than that in that list of things that you want to achieve. But yeah, maintaining that momentum and the organizational focus is the hardest part.
I totally agree. Steve, what keeps you up at night?
What keeps you up at night? What gets me excited is when I think of things like what's happened recently in October in California, where they passed a law saying that organizations, now they started big, that have more than $1 billion in revenue, have to report their ESG. Like the metrics on that are now critical. It's going to be as critical as having, like, you're going to have an accounting force, chartered accountants, keeping track of this stuff. To me, that one of the challenges, so this comes to your question of a challenge, is that organizations they don't have to do this stuff. So like we get distracted by things like the inbox,
Right.
the bottom line, the quarterly report, whatever it is, and it isn't necessary. It certainly can take a back seat when interest rates go up, inflation goes up, and the economy flattens. Everyone goes, okay, I've got my eyeballs on other things. But when organizations, either through laws like what's going on in California, or when I see organizations like we've had insurance companies come to us and say, our next vendor agreements and our next RFPs are all going to include aspects of ESG in it. So now you've got to participate in, how are you functioning in your community, and how are you doing things for the environment, and internal policies that make it a good place to work. That gives me hope. It means that, this stuff's really going to have a real reason. You're going to have a spec sheet that's going to say, 12-point coded, one side with ESG double whipped, and a side of carbon neutral recording. And it's going to just be part of the RFP now. And that's when it's going to make a difference.
Yeah. Great. Holly?
Yeah, I think for me, there's two main big things that keep me up at night. I feel like the first thing is being limited by the equipment and materials that you're already or you've been grandfathered into, I would love to just replace everything that we have with electricity powered equipment rather than natural gas, or, could do a complete retrofit of our building into like a heat pump heating system so it's way more efficient. There's all of these amazing things that could be done, and like they are technically possible, but aren't, feasible in a relevant time span. So that's one thing that you end up having to come up with creative solutions to sort of mitigate that impact that's going to be there for a while at least. I'd say that the other side of things is kind of being at the demand of your customers and what they're interested in producing. So as much as I would love to, only print on agricultural fiber papers or 100% recycled content paper, a lot of the times, customers have very specific ideas of what they want, and it may not work on those specific types of fibers. And, you're kind of limited by, what everyone else wants to do. Obviously education plays a piece in that, and you want to make sure that you're, educating your customers on what their options are and what could be, the sustainable solution to what they're trying to work with. But at the end of the day, the demand is what drives it, and that's what drives what we order. So, it's complicated in that way, and just trying to get the word out of, you can produce, your fancy magazine on an agricultural fiber paper or 100% recycled paper, and maybe that's going to communicate something different that's better.
Well, great. Thank you. So I think
just one thing to that page. You brought it up. I just thought it's, as you mentioned about gas and trucking, but when we did the research, we were surprised by how much transportation is. Like, you think, hey, it's because you're printing that you're emitting, or it must be because it's related to trees, but it's just we're in the transportation business. We move heavy things long distances. That's the definition of trucking. And the faster they get trucks and the transportation network electrified, that's going to be the number one thing that will, like, it's not the paper, it's not the trees, it's the transporting all this heavy stuff around and moving. We just have to, like, I called around to trucking companies. They don't even know what we're talking about. Like, over here in Europe, there's electric vehicles, electric buses. I took buses in London all over the place, all electric. In North America, we haven't really wrestled with the trucking company. Listening anywhere out there? Like,
oh, amen. I think we all agree with that. I think we have time for one more question until we open it up for our audience to ask questions. So, you know, greenwashing is obviously an issue. And so how do you avoid greenwashing, or what would you, any kind of recommendations that you would give someone that's kind of just starting out, not to fall in some of that greenwashing element? Because again, it's a lot of unintended consequences that happen. It's not that you're meaning to, but you can, you know, when you step in it, you step in it. And so, you know, what would you say, Holly? Start us off on how you would try to stay away from greenwashing.
Yeah, I think the number one thing that I always say is honest reporting and accounting. You know, you need to be honest about where you're starting, even if it doesn't, you know, sound that nice to begin with. You want to be really honest about where your emissions are coming from, what your waste is, your material usage. And then I find that greenwashing usually manifests in marketing campaigns. So the main thing that you would want to be careful with is your communication and messaging. You know, it's often strategically worded statements or some embellishment. You know, you might use the word renewable loosely when you're talking about energy, but you're not really including what you mean by renewable. You know, is the resource renewing itself every 10 years or every 500 years? You know, is that a time frame that's relevant to your business needs? Or like you might use the word recyclable to describe a material that you're using that's technically can be chemically recycled, but you know, isn't functionally recycled, you know, in your local municipality. So I think like when you're marketing a particular initiative or, you know, a statistic or result that you have, I always say, like, you want to ask yourself, can I back up this claim with evidence that a skeptic would accept? You know, am I choosing this wording carefully to avoid some negative image? You know, maybe I should rethink how I'm saying it because I don't want to be hiding something. You know, am I omitting some key information that makes me look better?
Right.
So just being mindful of that communication, I think is one of the number one things to do, and just being super honest and upfront, because, you know, if it looks bad to begin with, you know, you're saying that you're committed to improving that. And,
Yes.
you know, that's going to be important regardless.
And people always appreciate the transparency and to say, hey, we don't always have it correct, and we're always trying to get better. And it's okay to say, I, you know, we're not there yet, you know. So, well, Steve, have you ever had any experiences with greenwashing or any kind of guidance that you would provide?
Oh yeah, because it's like to Holly's point about marketing, you know, you want your whatever you're doing to sound a little bit exciting, and you want it to catch people's attention. You know, so we ended up with our slogan a couple of years ago, you know, like carbon neutral direct mail, because we wanted to catch people's attention. We know that it's not like, and then there's an asterisk and it says read our report, because within these parameters, that's the carbon we're talking about. This is what we understand it to be in this context, and so that's why we accept this name. But it's really hard because, and I've noticed that a number of organizations, I just read about one today where they're like taking a couple steps back from what they originally used as their verbiage to describe their initiatives. I think people are using caution. I think I went down and spoke at what was called Mailcom down in Las Vegas last year, I guess in February, and literally many people, and some of the senior postal people, said that they wouldn't never mention anything about environmental options for mail because they'd just be fried in the political landscape of the US. Like, it was so difficult for them to use words. They were so charged, you know? And so if they'd said things like, oh, we're trying to make an environmental, why you're an environmentalist, we hate you, you know, like, it's just so charged. Like, they're so careful. So not just greenwashing, but green cautioning. Like, it's like they can't open the dialogue. It's weird.
Right.
So I mean, I'm down there and like one of the reporters who was reporting on the event literally didn't know what to do with. He said, "I'm going to interview you for sure." And by the time we were done, he didn't publish anything. He was so afraid for like the magazine that he was working with and his own reputation and stuff. And he was definitely, you know, he was a right-wing guy. So if he wrote this article that covered this material, his friends were going to fry him. It's like, like, you know, it was just a weird thing to see.
Yeah.
But I think people want to be able to participate in something that is meaningful, and if that doesn't help the bottom line of the company, and they can't really, and they're slightly skeptical about, you know, environmental things, it's a tough go. So
sure.
greenwashing, you're on the one hand, you want to be excited about it and show marketing emotion, and on the other hand, you want to delicately
be thoughtful
responsible
at the same time. Yeah, exactly. Responsible. Richard, what do you have to add?
I think the risk, it's sort of like if you're committed to, or if the organization sees an opportunity to do, like, some projects or some work, then it usually isn't really a greenwashing issue. If the company's focused on on just strictly marketing communications as their primary way to communicate sustainability, then that's basically greenwashing, because the company isn't really committed to being a participant, So yeah, like that. If the primary work, and like 90% of the work is in, like, how do we communicate to clients about all this environmental stuff?
Right.
It's, then, and it's, it could relate to like supply chain stuff, like materials that you could buy, but there isn't really an organizational commitment around undertaking initiatives, then the risk of greenwashing is quite high, right? Like we see it in our industry quite a bit, right? When people have the environmental page, but there isn't really a lot of tangible action behind it. So I think the buyers are more sophisticated now. They can read that pretty quick. So it should really, to avoid it, you start with the goals of the organization, like staff-driven initiatives or management-driven initiatives that are relating to projects that you would undertake internally, and then communicate those. And then that kind of feeds into this idea of, like, leadership or there's sincerity there. Like it's pretty straightforward to me. If you're not really sincere about it, then it's basically going to be greenwashing. And if there's actual initiatives that require hours of work and people within your organization to figure stuff out and to accomplish something, then it's probably not going to be greenwashing.
Yeah. So. Excellent. Well, we do have a couple of questions from the audience. The first one, I love this question. It says, what strategies or initiatives have you found most effective in fostering a culture of sustainability in your organization? So what initiatives, strategies help foster that love for sustainability and that passion? Steve, why don't you start us off?
Good internal business communications. Like an organization that has a regular cadence of sharing information, kind of an openness with their staff, is going to get there. If you're kind of like publish an annual staff newsletter, it's not enough, right? It's got to be like use all the ways that we have now for all the channels, like whether that's posters in the lunchroom to your monthly meeting with your staff to the kind of newsletters that come out, have snippets of stuff in there, share successes, all that kind of stuff works, to get people on board. And then if it's sales driven, then your sales leadership has to be able to share the enthusiasm for that with the sales team, so they got something in their pocket, that means something as they go out. I think those are the sort of the key things. It's a good it's a cadence that you have to keep at. It's like you're like health and safety at your work. You know how that kind of works now.
Exactly.
With safer environment. It's got to be kind of like that.
Ingrained in the DNA, right? So that's what keeps it going. Holly?
Yeah, I completely agree with Steve. I think internal communication is such a big thing. I think one thing that's really useful in our organization, not to toot my own horn or anything, but having a sustainability person on the floor has been really impactful. It's a resource for our sales team. If they're met with a sustainability question from a customer, there's someone there to go out to reach out to get a little bit more information. I'm there to answer people's questions. They're like, hey, how the heck do I recycle this? And people have an internal resource to tap into. We also have a green team, kind of what Richard mentioned earlier, his organization. And that's made up of people from various different departments. It's a volunteer basis. It's people who are interested in it, in their personal lives, that want to contribute, something towards the organization. And a lot of the initiatives that arise from that team, has to do with the things that they're interested in themselves. And so, that gets a lot of traction that way. So, they'll organize, a gardening event, and, people who are interested in gardening will come out to that, or, we'll do things like the dumpster dive and, cajole people into a dumpster. But yeah, things like that. I think, having a team of people who can brainstorm and think about things that they're passionate about, and then slowly start to trickle that outwards to the rest of the organization has been really useful. And then, yeah, having that internal resource such as myself, to, ask the questions when they come up.
That was very important to have that. Yeah. And it actually is like a safe place to say, this may be a silly question, but I'll ask you because I feel comfortable.
Yeah.
So I think that's great. Richard, what would you have to add?
Yeah, similar to both comments, it's like just a regular, like Steve said, Kate, it's like there's a regular engagement of the staff in different ways. Like I think back earlier, and sort of look at Hemlock's older days, back in the day, there was the barbecues and like social events, and those things are all extremely important. But we're noticing now too, there's more interest for staff to participate in other things, like especially things that are broader societal things. And is there things in the company that help facilitate that interest? So the committee is key, and then newsletter. We have a newsletter, and we update the staff on activities there. And then the other piece, which I think we've done well over the years, is in our town halls, or like in our staff engagement, other things like, say, a Christmas lunch or town hall. We'll talk about how sustainability is also helping the business from a new business standpoint, and really driving home the business case to the staff that it's helping strengthen the company. So that just gets people to be proud of where they work. And one thing we did with this Social Purpose Institute, which is this local initiative around businesses developing a social purpose, is they asked us to survey staff, like as part of this onboarding sort of process, around what are they most proud of, and what would they change if they could change something in the company, like sort of broad survey. And it was very resounding. The majority, we got a lot of responses, like a high percentage on the response side, that people were most proud of the work that we're doing in sustainability and that
Wonderful.
kind of area as a leader. So they're like, we are really proud. And these are long-term people, new people. So I think, the regular engagement plus talking to them about how important it is as a business, for us to move in this direction, kind of instills that pride. So and it kind of goes to that greenwashing comment. Spend more time thinking about internal, like what are us as a company and us as a community want to do, and then let the communication kind of flow out from that. So internal communication is super, super important.
Well, and Richard, that goes into the second question that we have. How do you engage employees around sustainability initiatives? I know that you said that they like it. You get a lot of good responses, but how do you engage them, keep them that way?
Well, like, we go through these periods of higher levels of engagement and lower levels of engagement. I think we're still kind of building our way back to that engagement level. That whole COVID period was obviously a major business interruption, where most of the communication was like, something not really that good to reach. Right. It was like, do this or do that so that we don't get sick. But I think, that engagement level, at every opportunity when we're in front of staff, I think just making sure that some aspect of the sustainability piece is mentioned, and not just like, oh, this is what we did, we're great. Like, what do we want to do? What are the things we want to work on? Sort of continually demonstrating that commitment on behalf of management. And even if some of the people feel like, that's just, whatever, not even that meaningful to them, I think demonstrating the commitment is really important, because there's a lot of people listening that do care, and, right. And you don't want to play to the skeptics as much. You want to focus on, the people that are really passionate about it. So yeah, I think it's just commitment level and demonstrating that commitment level.
Holly, what would you like to add?
Yeah, I think one way to do it is, I think it's always good to communicate both sides of the issue. So if we're talking about why we've chosen to purchase, 95% FSC paper, people will just be like, okay, yeah, that seems like the thing to do, but people don't necessarily understand like what the alternative is, you know, what having FSC means for an organization and how it can, you know, help alleviate things like you're not supporting unethical labor, you're not supporting slave labor, you're not supporting, you know, all these horrible forestry practices. So if people start to understand like, no, this is a really impactful choice that we've made that's, you know, avoiding all of these other horrible things, I think you can become a lot more invested in it. Same goes, you know, you can say it for any single issue. You know, we're doing recycled paper because these are the impacts of using virgin fiber. You know, you want to know what both sides are just to have like that full understanding. You're like, oh my gosh,
Here's
this
a
is so
balance.
important.
Right.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
exactly. So that's kind of like the more serious, intense side. And then or the other way to do it, I think, is to make the initiatives fun. Like you're doing something internally, like, yeah, we're doing a dumpster dive and yeah, we're going to go root through garbage, but you know, we're going to put on our funny jumpsuits and we're going to do it as a team. And it's going to be this fun thing that we laugh about. And we're going to go have pizza afterwards. You know, it's going to be something that we're enjoying together. You know, we're having a good time. Like one of the things that we've been doing is we had a climate action pledge internally where, you know, anyone who wanted to could pledge to eat vegetarian however many days a week that they want to, you know, reduce some of the impacts of eating meat. And, you know, that's something we created a little group out of it. Anyone who wanted to join, you know, we can share recipes for fun vegetarian meals, and it becomes, you know, sort of this community of people who have committed to a certain initiative. So I think that's kind of the more lighthearted, fun way to get people well.
Absolutely. Steve, why don't you end us here with your thoughts about you know, how we can kind of move forward and again continue to educate our folks.
Well, thanks. The you know, I wanted to tell this little story, and I think I can segue it into your question. But what we want to ultimately have is when people choose these options, that it's has better outcomes for their business overall as well, right? Because it's one thing to say this. I think Holly's mentioned we've all struggled with this. Some people say, well, this is just costing me more. And is FSC paper really costing you that much more these days? The answer on that is probably not likely. But some of the other decisions might be costing a little bit more. But what you want to have is situations where just doing this had better outcomes. And the story I wanted to tell was there's an organization down in the States that's measuring not direct mail emissions, but like digital ad emissions. And so what they did is they took like the billions of things that are going as organizations called Scope 3, the billions and billions of transactions are happening every day. And some of them, to buy that little ad that's on, you know, the recipe that you're reading online, that has been moved from server to server to server all over the world. And it's way more costly from an emission standpoint than another ad that's coming directly. So they can tell this if they've found it. The point being is that if now you can choose to have only the low emission ads, they perform better. That's the outcome. When you act responsibly for your missions in a digital advertising world, you get better results. They're better performing ads. They go in the higher quality spaces in the right times for the right reasons. And we're in the direct mail business, and we have to keep thinking about how the decision to be to address environmental issues is going to be good for the outcome. So is being smarter about your mailing list and reducing the number of people instead of pitching it to everybody and hoping and praying. That's maybe not good for printing because you're like, oh man, that's like fewer pieces of mail, but it's going to have environmental outcomes and likely more positive outcomes for your client. Like response per piece of mail goes up. They're probably going to spend more on direct mail because it looks like a more positive outcome from mailings. These are all things you just want to roll it up into a package where this is good for business.
Right.
It's the right decision for the outcomes you want in your marketing.
Sure. Well, guys, I just think this has been so insightful. Unfortunately, all good things must come to an end. So I just want to personally thank Holly, Steve, and Richard. Thank you so much for your time, your insights, all the education you gave to us. And Andrew, I'll turn it back over to you.
Page. We actually have one hand up here. So hang on a second. Let me just allow Mike Winteringham, who I believe is with Mitchell, to ask his question. Mike, can you hear us? Can we hear you?
Mike,
maybe can I unmute your mic, Mike?
Mike isn't Mike.
Mike's not there.
He
Oh,
put up his
I
hand.
think Mike's one of your guys, so you're gonna have to walk over to him.
I'll go answer his question.
Yeah. Anyways, maybe we can answer Mike's question offline then. Listen, thank you everybody for participating in this session. Paige, thank you very much for both volunteering and helping out with moderation of this event. You guys were all fabulous. I'd call you rock stars, but there's an ad circulating right now that we're not supposed to say that anymore. So, just for everybody's benefit, the session has been recorded. We'll post a link to the video once we've managed to do some minor editing to it. If you enjoyed the event, please share that video with your colleagues, and to stay on top of our content, please subscribe to our channel and click on the bell so that you'll be notified anytime we post new content. And I encourage people to join SMG. It's through that membership that we can actually continue on hosting events like this, producing pieces like our design guide, and the like. And please stay tuned, as we're going to be having and posting invitations to our next event soon. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Have yourselves a great afternoon. Have a great week then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.